about Hitchcock in general. I consider Hitchcock first and foremost one of the great 20th century artists, and second after that one of the great filmmakers. So he was really an artist. His medium as an artist was the art of filmmaking. Hitchcock started out in Berlin in the German Expressionist era in the late 1920s, and then navigated to England, and then after England in the late 30s he moved to Hollywood, and the rest of his career mainly was in Hollywood. So we're going to start now with, we're going to start with the eighth most effective Hitchcock movie, which is Frenzy. Frenzy came out in 1971. It is really a return to Britain, a return to London, where Hitchcock grew up, and it's about a serial killer who kills women with ties, and it's basically it's connecting the dots between the appetite for sex, the appetite for killing, and the appetite for food. And it's clearly about a sociopathic character who eventually is caught and by making a mistake, and he is also, there's sort of a cynical statement in it that he's also very good looking and very charming. Number 7 on my list is North by Northwest. North by Northwest is one of the only ones on this list that's not a particularly scary movie or disturbing movie. It's really kind of a combination of an early James Bond thing, a spy movie with a bit of romance thrown in, and it's got a lot of double entendres. There's of course the famous train going into the tunnel at the end representing sexual intercourse, and there's a lot of it's kind of a play on the idea of Hitchcock is really fascinated with travel and really bizarre things happening to normal people. So that's a great movie. Number 6, the next one that really stands out is a 1942 movie, Hitchcock movie called Shadow of a Doubt. I'd say Shadow of a Doubt is really Hitchcock's first really dark movie. That's really a portrait of like a sociopath, kind of like Frenzy, only in a different aspect. It's also about a serial killer, and gradually he's also very charming. He's visiting the family in, I think, Santa Rosa, and gradually one of the kids, Uncle Charlie, and the female's name is Charlie, she figures out that her uncle is actually a mass killer and a psychopath. And part of this, the fear of the movie is what she knows and what we know, but the rest of the characters don't know. So that's sort of classic suspense. The next thing on the list, so number 6 was Shadow of a Doubt. Number 5 is Rear Window. Rear Window is about a killer, a man who murders his wife. And this is being witnessed by a lame person wearing binoculars, played by Jimmy Stewart, who's romancing Grace Kelly. And it's one of the great movies about voyeurism, and it's almost as if they want it to be a murder. They're sort of in their minds, they think at first that it may be a murder, and then gradually you get the idea that they're sort of morbidly want it to be a murder or want him to be caught. And then sure enough, he is a murderer, and we also are witnessing this horrible series of events. We are also inclined to sort of agree with the main character. We are caught and sort of being fascinated and participating with the idea of voyeurism and wanting sort of the worst thing to happen. The next thing on my list is Strangers on a Train, one of my favorites, one of Robert Walker's last movie, also starring Farley Granger. It's about a lot of things, but it's these two guys meet on a train. One agrees to kill the other guy's dad, the other guy agrees to kill the other guy's wife. One of them does it, the other guy doesn't. One guy thinks it's a joke, one guy takes it seriously. So it's kind of about the dark and light side of human consciousness. It's about, there's a lot of symmetry in this movie. There's a lot of mirror imagery of the dark and the light side of human consciousness. And interestingly, the most funny, the most interesting, the most charming character, once again, classic Hitchcock, is the villain. Hitchcock, like Shakespeare, is a master of making the villain incredibly charming and interesting and engaging. So Strangers on a Train is one of the great movies of all time. It's kind of one of his, along with Psycho, which we'll talk about later, is really a kind of an experiment in film noir in many respects. So the next one on the thing is Psycho. Psycho is a really good continuum from Strangers on a Train because Psycho is clearly a film noir masterpiece. Everybody knows about it. It was done on a very low budget. It's about a lot of things. It's very Freudian. It's a guy who's probably gay, loves his mother, but he's also sort of bi and he's attracted to the Marion Crane, and he also likes to stuff birds, so Mary Crane is a bird, and so there's a lot of incredible symbolism in it where there's the idea of birds as chaos and so forth, which we'll talk about later. So Psycho has been talked about so much I don't even need to get into it. It's amazing. It's one of the things that really stands out about Psycho is the incredible music by Bernard Herrmann, which is really derivative in a good way of Shostakovich's music. It's very dark and strident and rhythmic and really works in a perfect marriage with the film, the black and white film done by the way, TV crew. So the next, one of the absolute greatest is the next one, the second to the last is Vertigo. Kim Novak at her prime, Jimmy Stewart at his prime. It's a very amazing movie. It's basically about how the nature of love is that we tend to fall in love with ideas or people or things that don't exist. So in other words, Jimmy Stewart's basically falling for somebody that is a fictional character that's fabricated by the guy that he finds out later hired to kill his wife, who he believes is having an affair or something like that. So it's really it's Kim Novak really had to play two different characters. One, she was a blonde and then a brunette, which is kind of a Louis Buñuel reference in another one of those Buñuel surrealist movies. Dealt with the same character with different hair color, but it was the same character. So that was really interesting. Once again, Bernard Herrmann wrote amazing music for Vertigo. It's set in San Francisco, which is already a kind of mystical place, kind of the edge of the world kind of thing. So it's a very surreal, slow, dreamy, mesmerizing movie. It's incredibly hypnotic and it has a huge cult following. So the greatest Hitchcock movie is The Birds, in my opinion. So that's my last thing I'm going to talk about. The Birds is unbelievably relevant because it really is the first time ever where the villain in Hitchcock's case is actually the environment. The birds sort of symbolize the idea it could be global warming, it could be chaos and social chaos, but the birds represent something that man can't control. So that's what makes it so effective as a film. And by the way, it's also is one of the only Hitchcock movies, it's the only one on this list that doesn't have any music at all. There's no music in The Birds. It's all sound effects. There's lots of special effects, but they're all done really, really effectively. No digital back then, all done by high-end artists. It's essentially about the world going out of man's control, and I think that's really the reason why The Birds is the top on my list. It probably wouldn't have been prior to this age we're in now of COVID and global warming and social chaos and a fracturing of order and so forth. So anyway, Camille Paglia wrote a fantastic book on the Birds, Only the Birds, arguing, and I've been influenced by that, why it is, in her opinion, the greatest Hitchcock film of all ever. So thank you so much for tuning in. There's many other great Hitchcock films, and somebody else would have a completely different list, as I'm sure you know. So thank you very much for watching. All right, thanks.